Kolab Community Radio. Esto es Link Up, el arte de conectar. El espacio donde el conocimiento se comparte, las perspectivas se amplían y la comunidad se fortalece. Aquí, juntos desarrollamos una comunidad nada convencional que busca marcar la diferencia. Bienvenidos.
Hey guys, welcome to Kolab Community Radio. This is the first episode that we record ever. And the purpose of this podcast, this initiative is to the art of connecting, linking with different actors in the creative and startup ecosystems and many other creators out there. So we wanted to take advantage of your visit to Mexico. I'm going to introduce yourselves in a minute. To ask you about different things on your experience about connecting with other people and creating community and creating things, which is basically what you guys do for a living now. No? So I have with me right now Highline Beta, the members of Highline Beta. I have Ben Joskovitz. He's
That's me.
Founder of, along with Marcus, who's not here, but he's coming next week. Founder of Highline Beta, a venture studio based out of Toronto. You'll tell us a little bit more about that, what a venture studio is. We have Paige Halam. Yes, I'm pronouncing correctly.
You are.
Okay, she's a managing director of innovation at Highline Beta. And we have Eric Garbin, head of strategy. Welcome.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah, thank you for having
Perfect.
us.
So we kick it off. Okay, and we
Go.
kick it off with a good beer from Parque La Arena. Is not sponsoring this podcast. It's just
They are now. They are
they are
now.
now. Yeah, product placement. Okay, perfect. So guys, why don't you start like telling me what you guys do? Like what's a venture studio? What you guys do in Toronto? Can you explain
Sure.
a little bit?
Yeah. I mean, I Venture Studio is a company that builds other companies, builds and funds them. So we're really in the business of building startups and then funding those startups and trying to get them to some amount of scale faster than they would be able to otherwise on their own. And then Highline Beta has a corporate innovation services component to its business as well.
Okay.
And we do a variety of different things in that business, but one of them is working with corporate partners to spin out startups.
Okay.
So we can work with founders that have ideas. Sometimes we're working on our own ideas and validating them before we would recruit a founder and build a startup. And sometimes we're working with corporate partners, validating opportunities there, usually outside of their core business, and then turning those into new companies.
So sometimes these corporates come to you and they have an idea. You act sort of like an innovation department for them or things like that?
Yeah, I think that's a decent way of describing it. They come to us with new markets that they want to explore, opportunities that they're looking at, maybe new problems that they think are interesting, that they feel like they have a right to play in or build some new product or service in. But they recognize that they're looking for somebody on the outside to help them with that process.
That's important, I guess,
Yeah.
no? To just not to be biased from the inside. Maybe they need like fresh ideas.
Yeah, it's a bias and also just the speed with which we can work
yeah.
on the outside.
Okay.
So we can work much more quickly. We can validate things more quickly. We can prototype things more quickly, and then get them to an answer that we believe is the right one for them to pursue, whether it's build something in-house, maybe do nothing. Sometimes we invalidate things and we decide that's not worth pursuing. Sometimes we find existing startups that are worth partnering with. So it's not always about building something from scratch, but sometimes it is. And sometimes the answer is, hey, let's go build a company on the outside.
Okay. That's really, really cool. I mean, so you're in the business of creating. No?
In the business of creating all the time.
How is this page different from, how would you say is different from venture capital, like just funding startups? Because I guess I'm not sure if the audience, they all know what venture capital is, but maybe you can explain a little bit and how does it differ from the venture studio model?
Yeah, absolutely. So venture capital is the idea that you invest in companies and you provide them with capital and then you own a small piece of that company in exchange for that capital. In a venture studio model, that is a component of the model, but I think the main difference is that you're providing much more service beyond just capital. You're also helping them to validate the idea. You're doing some of that experimentation with them. You're helping to develop assets like I mean, it could be anything from a prototype to a website to a whatever that looks like, depending on what the business is and what it needs to prove early on in order to understand that it's a viable business that you actually want to pursue more broadly. And so really that's the type of work that we help folks
So
do.
you're more hands-on.
Much more hands-on, yeah.
Just not passive capital that you wait for 5 years and give me a return. You actually go into the business and try to do it with your own team, your expertise, and what you built in the past, right?
Exactly, yeah. So we're in there working alongside folks every day.
Okay, perfect. And tell us a little bit more about like what's how does it look like? I mean, creating, like, is it you build everything inside and then you yourselves, like, you just take it to the market, or you partner with founders, other guys out there, or are you like these god level creatures that you can do everything yourselves?
Yes.
Okay,
All
perfect.
of the above.
And we're done. Yeah. Cut. No, I mean, I can answer that. So the whole point of a venture studio is to partner with a whole variety of people. So we may do some of the early validation work on our own, but at the end of the day, we're trying to build venture scalable businesses, which means we need great founders. So we have to recruit at least, typically it's a solo founder to start, but we have to recruit great founders and we have to partner with them. They own the bulk of the business. Okay. So at the end of the day, it's going to be their business, and we're there as, I think of us as temporary co-founders. So we're going to help them very hands-on for a period of time, usually about 6 to 9 months. At which point we hope that we'll invest capital, and we'll hope to bring other capital to that new startup, and then they become a portfolio company.
So you mentioned something really interesting. So you go in, but you don't take the whole thing. I mean, like, you incentivize the founders so they keep part of, like, the majority of the business.
Yeah.
So they're incentivized enough to grow the business, be in the business, because creating a business, I'm sure, for whoever who's listening, creating a business is it's really tough. No, it's not everybody thinks like, oh, I'm gonna invent a business one day and when I'm 60. No, I mean, like, it's a journey and it's hard. So you incentivize them that way, no?
Yeah, the founders have to, in my mind, in Highline Beta's mind, the founders have to own the bulk of the company. So Highline Beta has the benefit of having a portfolio. We're going to build multiple companies. A founder builds one company, and they build it. If it goes well, they're doing that for 5 to 10 years of their life. Whereas in 5 years, Highline Beta might work on 20 or 30 or 40 startups. So we have the benefit of a portfolio. The founder has to be dedicated to one thing. So, we do want to make sure that the founders are incentivized to keep going. We want it to be their business. So even if they leave the venture studio and then realize that they need to pivot to do something else, the market is telling them they need to go to the left instead of going to the right. It's their company. That's their job. We're backing them. So that's a really important part of it. There are a lot of venture studios, I think, that take much more equity, and some are even taking 80% of the company. And that's just a different incentive model now for the type of founder you're recruiting.
Seems like a really scarce talent, no? Like, being a founder, like, you don't find them very easily. How do you find them? I think it's gonna be tied to my next questions, but I guess it has to do with building communities and connections and like.
Yeah, it's all community in a sense, because it's everybody you know and all of the people that you stay connected to. So most of the founders come from referrals, which shouldn't be a terrible surprise, which is coming from any number of sources. And it can be from very grassroots efforts. So think about running hackathons as an example and finding great talent that way. It can also be from VCs who meet lots of people and say, wait a second, I met somebody, they're great, but their company is too early. Or they have an idea, but they're not ready for me. Maybe they're ready for Highline Beta. So, if you think of the whole ecosystem that exists around building startups, from the very, very beginning to, let's call it, winning at the end, you have to build that whole network so that you get the best founders, and not just find the best founders, but get them at the right time. Because if they've already started their company and they're 2 years into it, for us, that's too late. That might be great for somebody else to invest in. We need to get them before they've started the company, before they've incorporated.
Not necessarily young, but probably
no.
just at the point that where they're still planning to do something with their lives. Maybe they just exited a company, or maybe they failed at a previous company, or they quit their jobs.
Yeah, it's not an age thing. It's a timing and readiness thing. So a lot of the founders we work with are older. A lot of them, or some of them, have come from corporate backgrounds. They worked 20 years in banking, are fed up, sort of tired of doing that, and they see all the problems that they want to solve that they couldn't solve inside of the big company, and they say, I have to go start a company. But I've never done it before, so who do I surround myself with that can help me do that?
Okay. That's like the value proposition from the studio, no?
Yeah.
Okay. So, well, now you've been here for 24 hours or less. What do you see here in Hermosillo? I mean, from what you've seen, what we're trying is to build communities, not necessarily just tech communities, but also any kind of groups and gathering people interests and giving them the space and the enablers for them to connect, to create. Is that something that, well, Toronto, let me say it this way, but it's a pretty much advanced city, an ecosystem, because it's a large city. It has top universities, it has lots of companies. Do you see, how was Toronto 10, 15 years ago? Someone wants to answer that?
Yeah, the space in Toronto, I think it's a big ecosystem in a big city now, but when you think about the venture space and you think about the startup space, it still is a pretty small group of individuals. And I think when you think of the bigger, broader city, it's an amalgamation of people, but broken into neighborhoods and communities and sectors and buildings, and those kind of micro communities that come together to build out the space. So I think Toronto, over time, we never really had the massive influx of capital or the massive large tech companies that you'd find in a Silicon Valley or anything like that. We just had our few bigger tech companies coming out of Waterloo or coming out of Toronto, and those have spawned off. You see people that work at those companies for a while, they have their exit or they move on to something else, and then those people are seeding the next generation of companies. And so it's this circularity of community,
like
where
PayPal mafia, but from
but from Shopify.
Exactly. The Shopify mafia.
Exactly.
That's a thing.
Yeah.
That exists.
No, definitely.
The Shopify mafia exists.
There will be a Kolab mafia one day.
Yeah, I believe
Probably
it.
15 years down the road.
I believe it. Yeah.
But what I think it's been interesting here, comparing Toronto 15 years ago to Toronto today versus coming to Hermosillo, is the intentionality that you have here is so different than even, I would say, what Toronto was 15 years ago. Yes, Toronto has built a tech ecosystem, and yes, it has built community, but I don't think there was ever people really thinking about that through line in a really intentional way. It kind of happened. We had different groups of people trying to do different things. But what I think has been so interesting about what we've seen so far is that, I don't know, there just feels like there's this intention behind what you're doing here today and trying to turn Hermosillo into a place for technology and a place for invention and creativity. And I think that that's a really interesting thing to be doing.
I do believe so. And there's intention. And one thing I would say is opposed to or compared to Toronto, which is a bigger city, 5 million people. We're a small city for Mexican standards, and we've discussed this. It's probably a large city in Canada for sure.
Yeah.
But before, let's say, Parque La Ruina, or there were just people with good intentions, but they were all spread out. So we found this place, and people start gathering around each other and creating or enabling these communities, because communities, they sometimes exist offline, off the grid. And then you found them and they start collaborating with each other. So that said, Toronto is, in Hermosillo, this is Parque La Ruina, and this is it, basically. I mean, in Toronto, it's a bigger city. How do you guys connect with each other? Or, I don't know, events, like online, how people started like gathering around each other and like creating these communities.
Yeah, I mean, on the tech side, there are a number of good events and a number of good communities. I think Paige is right when she says nothing was built in Toronto with the level of intention that you have here. Here you're doing things from the ground up. So whether it's housing or some of the agricultural work or the park here, it's like building all the pieces at the same time, which I find really interesting. So in Toronto, it's a little bit more disconnected, I would say there, but there are great tech events that are running. There are great tech communities offline and online. So I think that exists fairly well. And then there's still, as far as, maybe Toronto is 15 years ahead, maybe, but there's still grassroots things that are going on. So there are still people trying to do things.
Maybe with newer technologies.
Yeah, newer technologies, new co-working spaces, bringing back things that we used to do, that the community used to do. So there used to be some events like demo days where people would get together on a Friday at a simple small venue and anybody could get up and demo something that they had built.
Oh, yeah.
Not like a raised capital pitch, not a PowerPoint deck, but just get up and show what you have done. And then as the sort of community evolved and scaled, if you will, then that sort of went away because it's like, no, now it's all polished, it's all pitch decks, it's all about raising capital.
So it was more organic at the beginning.
Yeah, and now there's people trying to bring that back and say, let's just get together and show people what we're hacking. And it's like, okay, well that's cool because that just that's a talent thing. It doesn't have to be even startups. It's just how do you attract great talent? You go in a room with 100 developers or 50 developers and say, this is where I want to hang out.
It's like having like these gigs, like music gigs at a bar, and then you're having the nice concert with this full stadium. It's kind of different, like different stages, and you really crave the beginnings of like watching a band at a small bar, no?
Yeah.
So that so events work, no? So events and how are these? I mean, I understand right now you guys have Collision, Tech Conference, Blockchain Conference, and many others, no? But do you know some others like that are nascent? Like
I mean, I think AI has become a big thing in Toronto because of the university being there, and we have quite a few experts in the field. So there's even just things like I joined a Discord group for people who are doing a book club around AI and things of that nature. And so I think those are the types of things where you're like, okay, that's a new technology. People don't know a lot about that space. There are still these opportunities to kind of, find a reading group, find a group that's just interested in talking about new stuff together, whether that's a pub night at a bar or it's again, a Discord server. Like you can find these groups of people that are just interested in topics. And I think that kind of that small scale community building is really important as well, because then you connect to a topic and you connect to people that you probably wouldn't interact with in your day-to-day life.
Social media and all these like just made everything easier, no? Like people just connect with each other with. Okay, well that's very cool. Well, next topic is more on. So how many are you in your office?
Well, there's 15 people from Highline Beta, but then our office has other companies in it. So, it's not an official co-working space, just to be clear on the radio, just in case anybody's listening. But we, so for example, we have a portfolio company, Carbon Hound, uses our space. We've had other startups in the space.
So that's a company you invested, but you didn't necessarily create it.
That's right. Yeah,
Okay.
That's a company we invested in that didn't go through our venture studio. We invested at the pre-seed or seed stage, and they needed office space. There are 6 people, I think, 6, 7
to
people,
8, yeah.
6 to 8
growing
people.
every day.
Yeah.
Yeah, and so they're using our office because we have a decent size, about 5,000 square feet. We have a couple of other like service providers there. So we're also trying to, out of Highline Beta, we call it the Highline Beta Hub. We're trying to build a little bit of our own community around the things that we're doing, the things we're interested in, but also leveraging the space for other groups of people. So there's a sustainability group that uses the space. I think the Prop Tech Collective, which is like a group of people that just want to talk about real estate and property tech can use our space.
That's good, right? Because
Yeah.
that generates more people. It's a virtuous cycle.
Absolutely.
So people bring in more ideas and other people. So you get to grow the community by giving them the space, no? Like,
Yeah, the space matters. I mean, you need
Space
it,
matters.
right? Like you do need good physical space for people to gather. It needs to be accessible, it needs to be affordable. And so you need that. And I think there's a decent amount of space, let's say in a city like Toronto, but we get to curate our own. So who do we want in that community? What types of events do we want to be running? We've run some of our own events, with investors and our portfolio companies. Of course, that's strategic for us. But we've also run events with founders where we brought a bunch of founders in and did like workshops with them, just because that's just talent networking and acquisition for us. So I think physical space matters because it's a way of bringing people together.
is there like a way you guys connect with them aside from the business side? Like, I don't know, wellness, meditation, like balancing work life and personal life. I know it's important, hybrid work, remote. Is there ways you guys connect with your team, but also with these extended teams that you have in your space? What do you do?
Well, we have a
Yeah.
monthly lunch as an example. So we as
You have
part of
lunch
Highline-
together?
Yeah, like
Yeah.
I know that's simple, but like having, especially during the pandemic, Canada was locked down for a really long time,
Yeah, I know,
so we
yeah.
couldn't be we couldn't be in person for a really long time. So during the pandemic, we started doing just Zoom lunches. So we'd all like sit together and eat, even if it was just quiet and we're all working on our own, just to kind of have connection during the day, because otherwise you're at home by yourself. And then that spawned into Lisa, who runs kind of the hub, thinking about how can we bring people into the space for lunches? How do we just have more intentional events so that you can talk? And then Chris on our team actually put together all these kind of events with different questions that you'd ask each other that are more personal than about work, because it's really easy to connect to people about work, but it's harder when you're in a work setting to have more personal connection with people.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
so being intentional about asking questions of people and having conversations that are a bit deeper it's been really nice, actually. It's been a lovely way to connect with
I like
people.
that. Second time you mentioned intention, and I think it's a really powerful word because people can self-organize and, like, let's say, let's do a reading club, whatever. But you do have the intention of pushing that into the agenda so people connect.
Yeah.
I think it's good to be intentional, no, on that side.
And the intention up front is helpful because, like, after you have a monthly lunch, and that's not just like our team, that's everyone that's in the space is invited. And so once you get to know someone from everywhere, then the space comes back into play where you have collisionable moments and you're running into someone in the kitchen, or you're trading off a meeting room with someone else. And so you get to build that relationship a little bit deeper over time because you had the intention to spark that initial seed, and then you can take the conversation there anywhere you want to be on that.
So let's say you organize the lunches, but it's not like, oh, this is going to be a working lunch and we're going to discuss this. It's just so free that people don't feel they're working.
Exactly.
But in the end, they will connect in ways they naturally connect outside from work.
Exactly. Yeah, because then you're like, oh, I know a little bit more about you as a person. So like, I foster dogs. Oh, you also do. It's like
Sometimes
those little
you don't
facts.
know. You're next to someone and you assume you know him or
Exactly.
her, and there's a completely different person or another person within. No?
Exactly. Yeah.
Interesting. So, well, I know you guys. Well, a venture studio per se is flexible. I don't think you have a problem managing change yourselves, because creating a startup is change after change. No, you start with an idea, and definitely you have to pivot because the market didn't want your idea, and so you start. I mean, that's your business. But you also work with corporates, and corporates are these big animals, like these transnationals, that they want to innovate and they want to do everything, but they have processes and they don't know how to manage change. I mean,
Yeah.
they are actually very stiff. How do you do that? I mean, how do you manage change with them? And if you can tell a story, it would be even better.
Tell us.
Example. Tell a story. Yeah.
Okay.
Tell a story.
I think I'll tell my favorite story because I just find it funny. It's a funny story. So we worked with a large consumer packaged goods company who they had a whole pillar of innovation. And that pillar of innovation was to create a healthier world. And to do that, they were going to create healthier food products. That was one of the things that they wanted to do. And so we went down this whole path. It was like a year and a half of work, probably, doing all of these different businesses, starting them, seeding them into the market, thinking about, okay, who's the actual customer? What does that look like? What does a prototype look like? We did all of this work. And then a year and a half in, suddenly someone's like, well, you have to talk to this guy. And we went, okay, who's this guy? And they went, he's the risk and compliance officer. And so we had a meeting with this guy, and you know what he said?
No.
You can't put any fresh food into any products because there is a chance of a recall.
No way.
And that is the only target that he has in order to
Really?
be successful
That's
in
his
his job.
incentive. Like his,
Yes.
That's his job.
That's his job. Like
That's his entire
to create not healthy food.
Correct. But not healthy, but safe.
Okay, exactly.
Right,
That's
yeah,
the
so-
incentive is not aligned. It's just like safe at all costs.
Exactly. Safety at all costs, even if it's not healthy. And so I think that was a really good experience in saying, okay, these are things that we need to learn before a year and a half of work goes by, because we've been developing, this smoothie company. And now that we know that we can't put any fresh foods into a smoothie, it's very difficult to make a smoothie.
At least a good
good one,
smoothie.
yeah.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Fair.
You can make one.
And so I think that's a good, and so it's a good example, I think, not only because it's funny, but also because it shows you that when a company structure creates incentives that go against innovating, so that's a great example of, right? His entire incentive was against allowing this innovation to happen. You can't create innovation when that's the context you're working from. And so that's one thing we do a lot of work on with some of the big corporate clients that we work with, is how do you actually change the incentive models within the organization to allow things like failure? How do you make that safer so that way, obviously we don't want to recall a bunch of food products, but can we start to experiment with that? And can we think about how to do that?
So you go
in a
into
safer
that,
context?
that sounds like another whole project, like trying to change the culture.
Yes,
And you do that.
we do. We
They
work
hire
with,
you to do that. Like, okay, so we noticed this guy or this department that wouldn't allow you to innovate where you want to go.
yeah,
So you have to change.
exactly. And so
And
we
you
don't we don't do the change
No.
management part of it, but what we will do is say, in order for this to happen, these are the things that do need to change us. So we'll go through that process of identifying those things.
And I hope
with
they
them.
do it.
Yeah,
No?
me too. Not always.
Not always.
We do.
But it's-
I wish Paige had started with a success story.
Oh,
I mean,
sorry.
yeah,
Tell
But
me
it was a
tell
funny
me another one,
story.
Yeah, yeah that's
it is a funny story, and it does show you all the stakeholder management that you have to do, and sometimes these groups within large companies try to splinter off. Oh, we're going to go innovate on the side, and then only realize that they have to go back and work with the mothership in order for those things to be successful, and that's usually where it falls apart. But we have had, of course, we've had success stories as well. Usually those are sort of groups that do, to some extent, break away from the core so that they can operate differently. But then what you learn is that they have to stay connected as well, and so they have to be there in part to serve the core business, but by building new businesses. And that's a very tricky thing to do. But I would say one example where it was successful was when we were working with Royal Bank of Canada, RBC. It's the biggest bank in Canada. And they decided they wanted to go and build new ventures, new businesses outside the core of banking. So the idea was, don't touch anything that's like a core banking product or service. We're going to build things around that. But they had to, and when we started working with them, there were about 5 people. So they already had the mandate, the CEO, so part of it is getting top-down support for these things. So you have the air cover. And we ended up helping them build like the whole organization called RBC Ventures. We helped them build it. There was about 15 businesses that were built. Some of them didn't work, of course, some of them did fail, and that was a process to go through. But about 5 of them are now scaling. This is years of work, right? Like they've been at, we were really working with them very closely for a couple of years, but it's been about 5 years now. So it shows you how long it can take for something like this.
It sounds like they were open to do it.
Yeah,
I mean, they were like, we want to change.
Yeah.
They were not resisting change.
No.
They were like looking for it. And you guys found a way on how to do it.
Yeah, but it's definitely challenging, particularly in a regulated industry. Banking, insurance, health is another example where the regulations do limit what these companies can do. So you're always just trying to find a way around those things, obviously in a legal way, but also if you do it too far from the core, so you just sort of go rogue and say, we're going to go do whatever we want. We're going to go do it in another, it usually actually starts with a
it
new
was
office.
peripheral, but not core.
Yeah,
but
it
was
has
there.
to drive value.
Yeah.
If it doesn't drive value back to the core business, they eventually shut it down.
So what you did there in that example is you took the core, didn't touch the core, but planned around the core to like what are the industries or what are the tech that can impact the core without changing the core.
Yeah.
No, something like that.
Yeah, I mean, in this particular case, I think the interesting thing with banking is that most banks, everybody has a business bank account, or you have a checking account, a savings account, a credit card, whatever it is. But banks, you don't really interact with them very often. And most of the time, your experience with them is neutral at best, let's say. Right?
At best.
At best. So I'm being polite. It's the first podcast ever. I'm trying to be polite.
We're not talking about RBC, but
or any other bank in Hermosillo. I don't know them. So that experience is, neutral at best. And so what RBC thought was, and I think this was a very strategic move, was to say, let's go beyond banking. And if we can interact with users or customers before they need banking services and provide them more value outside of that, then they will naturally come to us for banking services. So a very simple example is a business called Owner. An owner helps somebody in Canada start a business. You want to register the business, incorporate the business, whatever it is. And naturally, when you go and you start a business, one of the things you need after that is a bank account. So if we help you before you need the thing that the bank does, we create more value for you there, and then we drive you to using our banking services. We don't force it, but that's creating value before you would normally interact with the bank.
That's great. I mean, what I'm loving about this is taking in that's an example. But if we're talking about change, and there's the thing that you want to change is difficult to change. You have to take a broader view, a 30,000 feet view, and understand the whole journey of a user in this case, and try to impact other things that would impact what you want to change without being intentional of changing that. No, like so that's great. I guess. That's what I got from that. No, like understanding the journey, understanding like the whole spectrum to affect change. No? That's really cool. So, now tell me a little bit more. You chose this venture creating career now. It sounds really fun. I'm sure it is. It might be stressful as well. Can tell us a little bit more about that. But what were you doing before? I mean, why you chose this path? I mean, sometimes like just life puts us in this path, but what were you doing? What were like your aspirations? Maybe each of you can tell me, like, you find purpose in what you're doing right now? Why? Tell me a little bit more about that.
Yeah, I mean, I started Highline Beta 7.5 years ago, and my background's been in the tech space. I started my first company in 1996. So I've started all software companies. So I started a few software companies. I've worked for a few software companies, both B2B and B2C. Before Highline Beta, I was an angel investor. I made a number of angel investments in startups. So my whole career has been in the tech space as a founder, or usually running product at software companies. So when Marcus, who's my co-founder, got together, we there's two things we really enjoy doing. One is investing in very early stage startups, often before anybody else is willing to write a check. So backing founders at the earliest stage, but we also really like building companies, like getting our hands dirty and doing stuff and helping. So not just writing a check and then saying good luck, but actually getting into the weeds of it and building. So when you combine investing and building, that's where you get a venture studio. So my background, again, has just been meandering through the tech space for 20 whatever thousand years, it feels like. And that's why I started Highline Beta, because I like building and funding companies.
So were you intentional on creating a venture studio, or you were like,
We were.
let's continue funding and we'll help them?
No, so we were intentional. We had an original thesis that was, again, back to the corporate innovation piece, where we were going to work where the idea was, let's work with big companies, help them uncover new opportunities, and then spin those things out into new startups. So leveraging the assets that exist within large companies to build new startups. That was the original hypothesis or thesis of the company. So we started working with big companies. We tried to encourage them to spin companies out. It turns out that that's a bit of a painful exercise, although we've done it a few times successfully. And then we shifted the model a little bit to say, well, we still want to go build and fund companies. We also still want to be working with corporate partners, because those dots still do connect. You never know when there's value that crosses over between those two things, but less focused on that original thesis. But yes, the original idea was, we're going to go build and fund companies. That was the goal.
So first you said, I'm going to find these ideas with corporates and I'm going to do them with them. I'm going to make these companies with them. But then you realize that it might be easier said than done, no? So So you still get ideas and get, like, you can validate the market because these corporates need it, but maybe you're better off yourself just building it yourself with your team.
Yeah.
And another founder.
Exactly. But I think, and then if we do that, and then we can bring those startups to our corporate partners after. So again, I think of Highline Beta as really a business designed to connect the dots between anybody and everybody that should be involved in helping startups be successful. And so when you look at a corporate, they have all kinds of things. They have lots of great, smart, talented people. They have lots of customers. They have capital. They have data. They have all of these assets that are interesting. So again, the original thesis was, let's leverage those assets to build startups to help them accelerate faster. Again, bit of a painful process. So now we maybe work the other way, which is bottom up. Start with the founder, work on the idea ourselves.
You can move faster, no?
You can move faster, and then connect them into the corporates and see if that helps accelerate the process after. So again, to me, it's always just about connecting as many dots as possible and trying to help founders and startups scale more quickly than they would otherwise on their own.
Oh, that's cool. I mean, it's all connecting. Coming back to the purpose
now,
of the
now, why Paige and Eric joined the company, I have no idea.
So no,
honestly, no idea. So let's ask
Next
them.
question. Next question is,
why do you work for Highline Beta?
Exactly. And you have to be polite and very,
you have to be 100% honest. And I will
honest. Exactly.
I will close my ears, and you can
Exactly.
La 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 la.
Paige, what were you doing before?
Yeah, it's a great
Do
question.
you like working with Ben?
I do
Is
like
Ben a good boss?
I do like working with Ben. So before I had several different careers before this one, but I've been at Highline Beta since 2018. Before that, I was doing an MBA. Before that, I had worked in advertising and marketing primarily throughout my career. But I think I always really liked working on things where the goal was understanding people and why people behaved the way that they did, and understanding how you can connect people in different new ways. And so as much as sometimes people ask me, like, how did you get to this place of working on companies and working in a venture capital context and all those things, because it doesn't really connect to the career I had before. I actually think it does, because a lot of research is just understanding what are the problems that these things solve in the world, and what are the problems that people have that need to be solved. And that's, I think, the part that I really like about working at Highline Beta, is that early stage thinking about net new companies is really figuring out what's the problem, who are the people, and how do I build something that provides value to those people? And then the interesting part of that, which is the math side, is that viable? Can we actually build a profitable business to do all of those things? And it's a little bit like a puzzle, bringing all those pieces together. And I think that's what I enjoy.
That's great.
She didn't say anything about
nothing bad. You listen,
or
wisely.
She just ignored the question. I just put that on the record, please.
But I'm glad you mentioned, you explained a little bit about the process of researching and validating an idea. And I want to take a moment just to explain to the audience, whoever is listening, and if there's founders out there. I'm an entrepreneur myself, and most of the time we're pushing our ideas to the world, hoping that everybody accepts our idea, and we don't make the homework of iterating and understanding what the consumer wants. And that's what the venture studio does, and it's crucial to building companies, no? So sometimes we start with a problem, right?
Yeah.
What's the problem? And if the problem big enough, is the pain big enough that my solution will help them? Instead of, I have this product and I don't care whatever you feel or if you have pain, but believe me, this is a good product. And sometimes that's one of the reasons why many companies fail, no? Because we push so hard our solutions, and we marry the solution, not the problem itself.
Yeah.
So thanks for bringing that up.
No.
And I'll make a note that you're not super excited at working with Ben, but fair enough.
So, you know what?
I mean, I've been around for 6 years almost, so it's clearly gone okay.
That's evidence.
Yeah, exactly.
And it may be shocking, but people have said worse things about me. So it may shock our listeners, but that's true. So.
Okay. So what about you, Eric?
So I came from the world of management consulting. So similar type of start with a problem. Now that problem could be anything across the spectrum. But I eventually started moving towards the venture and corporate innovation side in that space. So spent about a decade there and building things in a similar space. But I think one of the challenges I found was just that lack of ownership past a certain point. And you create something, you do that initial user research, you build the strategy, you build the Excel model that gets turned into JavaScript, that gets turned into the first version of the calculation engine, but you kind of get it to the first 500 customers and then it's in someone else's hands. And so I think the jump to Highline Beta was really to take more of that ownership of the process, ownership of the solution, getting to know the founders as they're coming in, living with them a lot longer, and kind of back to that like corporate change dimension, being able to say there's real opportunity in this space, there's real traction here, and not necessarily having to wait for perfect alignment with a corporate to want to go do that thing, and having that second avenue to be able to say, hey, we're really passionate about the space. We think there's a there. Let's put a team together. Let's find a founder. Let's build a company around this. Just having the option to have that conviction and have that path to build something.
It's nice to be a consultant, right? You just have to make lots of slides and say you have to do that, but you never go and actually execute. And this is what you guys are doing right now. You take it on your own hands and you develop it, you create it. I think that's exciting, no? You get to experience the whole process with a founder, not just on your desk, like making slides. But I'm sure you really enjoyed that stage of your life as well. Yeah. I did it for some time.
We do make some pretty nice slides.
Yeah, definitely.
We do. Yeah.
We have a good. We have an expert here.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
So thank you for that. I think that's crucial. Like building is getting your hands dirty and definitely iterating and being open to fail, and to don't marry your solution, but your solution might change. Like it's practically impossible not to do the other way. No, like that's one of the things that I've learned so far, talking to you guys and learning more about the whole industry, about venture studios. So, well, lastly, I think it's been a really nice conversation. Hope you enjoy Hermosillo. We're going to take you for dinner right now. But before we go, I think my intention is that this podcast is heard by creators, people. Well, I would love tech founders to listen to this, but also any other creator, because I think creating and being entrepreneurial about anything is about starting things and not waiting for the perfect moment, because the perfect moment never happens. No? What's your advice? I mean, if you could give like a short advice to founders or creators or entrepreneurs, what would it be?
Yeah, it's a good question. I mean, all I can say is I started my first company in 1996. I was in university at the time, had no idea what I was doing. I met a few other guys. They also had no idea what they were doing. It's like, well, that sounds like a good idea. Let's go start a company. So, I mean, I had the means to do it, I guess, So I would say my advice is like, don't sell everything. Don't mortgage the house. Don't put yourself into a position where you may end up in financial ruin. But if you can do something, do it. Because there never is a perfect time. That doesn't exist. It really doesn't exist. And I've started a few companies. I failed a bunch of times, like fallen right on my face. And then you just, it's painful and takes a while. And then you just get back up and you do it again. So, and it doesn't have to be tech startups. It could be anything. So it could be a side hustle. It could be something you're just trying and experimenting with on the side. It doesn't really matter. To me, it is just about giving it a shot. I do think you should don't do it by yourself in isolation. Maybe you start it on your own, but this is where I do think community becomes really important, because it is very lonely. Like being the founder of something, of anything, can be very lonely if you're not working with other people. It doesn't mean you have to co-found it with somebody because I find a lot of people wait to find the perfect co-founder before they start the company, and that's okay. But maybe you should just start it and then see if you find the person after. But I think the community of people, other founders, other creators, whatever it is, that's really important, because otherwise it can be very lonely. Plus, you don't know what you're doing.
No, definitely.
So I think that would be my advice.
There's a lot of jealousy in protecting your idea, because they're gonna steal my idea, but. Nobody steals your idea, because the only who believes in your idea is yourself.
Yeah, and the other people already have their own brilliant ideas.
Exactly. Well, that's another advice, but start with like sharing these ideas. Sometimes like they don't want to share or be with other people because they're gonna steal the idea, and that never happens, no?
No. Yeah, the more open you are with people, the higher the likelihood of success. It's not causation, it's correlation, as in, but generally speaking, the more people you connect with, the more people you talk to about your idea, the more you're willing to learn from other people, the higher the chance of success, because the higher the chance of connecting with somebody who actually moves the needle for you. Oh, I know somebody that can help you with that, Ricardo. Oh, I know somebody who can do this. Oh, I'm interested in that business. Maybe I'll invest in that. So I think, to me, being protective, like staying in your own, home and doing your own thing and not sharing it with people is a big mistake.
Okay. Perfect. Couldn't agree more. Paige?
Yeah, I think my piece of advice would be that there's an intersection that you need to find when you're starting something net new. And that intersection is between what you're really interested in and what other people are really interested in. And finding the intersection of those two things is quite critical, because I think we often see founders that find things that they're very interested in and no one else cares about. And that is not a good business. And similarly, it's hard to start a business that you don't care about at all, because you're going to spend a lot of your life doing that thing. And so when you start to think about what ideas you're passionate about, find that intersection and then go and test whether or not that's really real in the world. Like, start with the things you're interested in and go and test in the world what other people are interested in as well. And use that to kind of wayfind your starting point for where you want to start building.
That's a great piece of advice, I guess.
That's very practical. Mine was like, just go do it.
But I think it's very good, because sometimes, you can always like start something that nobody cares about, but it depends on what you want to do. With your business, no?
Yeah.
So yeah, perfect. I think it's like finding the intersection is great. Yeah.
You guys covered some really good bases there. Community building was the first place I was going to go.
That's why you always go first with these types of questions.
Exactly.
I should have gone the other way around, counterclockwise. Next time.
Ben always last.
Yeah.
No, I think that overcoming that imposter syndrome of like, who am I to build a company? Who am I to like start something from nothing? Is challenging for a lot of folks. And I think it's just understanding like, what are your superpowers? What are the things that you do really well? And then it comes back to, okay, how do I find a community, or how do I find those resources or people around me that can help supplement those superpowers that I do have to take something from an idea to a company? And so making that first step is a big jump of it in doing it, but having the belief in yourself that I need to either have the idea perfect or my skill set needs to be perfect, holds a lot of people back. And so just figure out, I'm good at these things. I can build a community or find other people to help me with these things, or it's a co-founder, or it's a venture studio that can help me with these other things that will take this idea from the back of my mind out into the world, get validation, and then you're building a company off the back of that.
That's great. I love the imposter syndrome thing. We all experience it, and this is for anyone who's listening as well. Is the idea of you don't believe in the back of your head. You're always thinking that you're a failure, that everybody's gonna discover that you are an imposter, and that you are not good enough for what you're doing. You know? And that's just a psychological thing. So I think that, and so breaking that imposter syndrome, and also understanding that, because we all have this idea that CEOs and co-founders, they're like just magicians and like geniuses, and everybody if you don't know about technology, be open about it. I mean, maybe you're a very good business person, or you know how to connect with people, or you're very good at nutrition or any vertical you want to work with, but you're not good at something else. Find partners and find people that can help you with those things. Huh? I love it. Well, guys, I think that's pretty much about it. Anything you want to say? You want to come more often to Hermosillo?
Yeah,
Absolutely.
yes. Thank you for having.
You like the food?
Yeah, it's great. The people are super nice. It's been a great trip. So I really appreciate everything that everybody has done for us.
Thank you, and thank you for coming here. We're really happy as well, and thank you. Let's kick it. Let's go and have dinner. Thank you for being the first guest in our show.
Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you for having me. Yeah.
Perfect. Exactly. Now everything like the bar's too high. Yeah. Perfect. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Cheers.
Yep.
Go.
Get the club.
Yeah.
Kolab Community Radio.